They said it was about freedom. That's what they always say. But behind the slogans, the banners, and the so-called free speech was something older. Something rotting. Something this city has seen before. It started quietly. A message board post. A podcast episode. A grainy livestream of a man in a grey suit, talking about how America had lost its identity. How real patriots needed to take it back. He called himself Cole Maddox. To his followers, he was a war hero, a strategist, a savior. To the rest of us, he was a symptom. A flame in a forest of dry lies and bitterness. A man who'd never found peace, so he chose to make war. He built his movement from resentment. From rage. From people who blamed everyone but themselves. They named themselves the Resist Front. And they weren't resisting oppression. They were resisting change. Color. Queerness. Women. Truth. They started in backrooms, then gyms, then Facebook groups. Then parades. Then training camps in the woods of Pennsylvania, Georgia, Colorado. And when the courts told them they could march in New York City, they took it as permission. Not to speak. But to terrorize. We didn't know how close they already were. The first flyer showed up in Jackson Heights. Folded into the corner of a subway bench. Black and white, military fonts, American flags twisted into spears. Resist NYC, July 28th, take back the city. Most people laughed at it. Some posted it on social media with clown emojis. But others read it in silence. Others tucked it into pockets. And far from the city, in Idaho, in Ohio, in Arkansas, young men packed bags. They said they were coming to defend the Constitution. But they packed helmets, batons, knives, bear spray. They weren't coming for debate. They were coming for war. New York felt it, even before the headlines caught up. A drag performer named Venus Extra was spat on walking home in Hell's Kitchen. A Sikh father and his son were pushed onto a train track in Queens. Swastikas were spray painted on a Jewish community center in the Bronx. But when local activists spoke out, the mayor told them, "We cannot shut down speech we disagree with. Even when that speech carries torches. Even when it's wrapped in camouflage." The courts agreed. Answer, the Resist Front booked their permit. Lower Manhattan. Federal Plaza. 1 mile from where immigrants were processed at Ellis Island. 3 blocks from the African burial ground. 10 steps from the 9/11 memorial. It wasn't just a rally. It was a calculated invasion. But the city. This city. It doesn't forget. Maya Jackson remembered. Her father, a civil rights professor at NYU, was beaten on a Brooklyn sidewalk in 1994. His crime? Holding hands with her mother, a white woman. He survived. Barely. She was 6 years old when she saw her first hate crime. 6 years old when she learned that skin can be a target. Now she was 28, a journalist. Documenting the patterns her father warned her about. When she read the name, the Resist Front, her body tensed. Not from fear. But recognition. She had seen these men before. Not their faces, but their kind. She remembered them by the sound of their boots. In another borough, another story. Ricardo Vega, Rico to everyone, was raised by a mother who cleaned luxury apartments in Soho and a father who sold piragüis in Sunset Park. He was queer. Out. Bold. Unapologetic. And when word of the rally reached his community center in Bushwick, he didn't flinch. He pulled together the city's fiercest organizers, students, clergy, drag artists, veterans. He called them into a circle and said, "They want to test us. Let's show them what happens when New York unites." But what do you do when you're asked to prepare for a hate group legally marching through your streets? You organize. You warn. You plan. And still, you feel the dread in your spine. Community centers stocked first aid kits. Teachers wrote letters to their students, telling them to stay home that day. Elderly Holocaust survivors pinned their family photos to protest signs. And somewhere across the river, the Resist Front finalized their checklist. GoPros. Walkie-talkies. Maps. Exit plans. They weren't preparing for a demonstration. They were preparing for a siege. Still, the city pulsed louder. Across neighborhoods, resistance rose. A mosque in Queens hosted an interfaith dinner. A synagogue in Harlem lit candles for the first time in years. If you haven't liked this story or subscribed to this channel, please do so now. A group of queer teens from the Bronx choreographed a protest dance. College students started distributing guides on how to legally film police. On TikTok, the hashtag #Notanosity gained 14 million views in 3 days. There was pain. Yes. But there was power, too. Beautiful, ferocious, unstoppable power. A reminder that this place, this messy, noisy, magical place, doesn't belong to bigots. It belongs to the ones who've built it, fought for it, loved in it. By the time the city awoke on the morning of July 23rd, the air was different. Tighter. Sharper. Flyers hung from every lamppost. Mutual aid volunteers moved water bottles through alleyways. Artists painted murals overnight that said, "Love louder. We don't flinch. You can't scare a city that never sleeps." But even as the streets bloomed with color and courage, the storm kept moving closer. And no one knew yet how high the cost would be. The news stations still called it a rally. But in the neighborhoods where the people lived, it already felt like a siege. By now, the flyers were everywhere. The date circled in red on every activist calendar. Stores were closing early. Churches were staying open late. The Resist Front had filed a permit. The city had approved it. And the city's people were preparing like it was a hurricane. Because it was. The eye of the storm wasn't rain. It was men with flags. Maya Jackson knew the signs. Not just from her father's stories, but from her work. She had been tracing far-right groups for months. Watching forums, decoding encrypted messages, following money trails. The Resist Front wasn't just angry. It was funded. Connected. Organized. Some members had military backgrounds. Others worked in politics, law enforcement, tech. They weren't fringe anymore. They were in the room. Sometimes, they were the room. When Maya received the leaked chat logs from a whistleblower, her hands trembled. This wasn't just a protest. If you haven't liked this story or subscribed to this channel, please do so now. This was a planned demonstration of strength, with implied violence at its core. They had maps of the subway system, targeted neighborhoods, exit plans, and phrases like, "Make them remember. Blood isn't off the table. Victory optics." She published what she could. But by the time it hit the news, the headlines diluted it. Leaked messages raise concerns. March organizers deny intent to incite violence. But the streets knew better. In Bushwick, Rico Vega was running on 0 sleep and a full heart. He'd lost count of the meetings, the security walk-throughs, the media interviews, the tense phone calls with the city council, and with his mother. She begged him not to go. But he said, "If I don't show up, they win. If none of us show up, this becomes their city." And it isn't. His voice had become a movement. Not a leader. A connector. Because this wasn't about one face. It was about all of them. There were elderly Holocaust survivors coming down from the Bronx, with signs that read, "I've seen this before." There were Black Lives Matter chapters linking arms with undocumented organizers, sharing water, printing guides, training medics. There were Muslim teens who planned to skip school and march anyway. And queer elders who'd been at Stonewall, now rising once more from wheelchairs. They weren't naive. They knew what could happen. But they also knew the cost of silence. New York had seen this before. In different uniforms. Different chants. But the same hunger for control. The same fear of change. The night before the rally, the city pulsed like a heartbeat in a fist. Helicopters looped overhead. Metal barricades lined the courthouse. Snipers took rooftops. But below, in community centers and apartments, in bodegas and barbershops, people were praying, preparing, and promising each other. We hold the line. We hold each other. The morning came hot and gray. If you haven't liked this story or subscribed to this channel, please do so now. Maya wore a flak jacket under her clothes. Her camera crew moved quietly. They weren't filming a protest. They were documenting history. Rico stood at the front of the counter-march line, holding a banner with 40 names, each a victim of hate violence in the last 5 years. They walked. And on the other side of the plaza, the Resist Front arrived. It was quieter than anyone expected. No shouting. No music. Just rows of men in matching khaki pants and navy shirts. White masks over their faces. Red flags over their shoulders. Like a military unit. Marching in step. Eyes fixed forward. And then the crowd began to chant. New York hates Nazis. This is our city. Whose streets? Our streets. It started slow. But it grew. It grew like a wave. And for the first few minutes, they just stood opposite each other. Until one of the resist members broke formation. Ran toward the crowd. And punched a protester in the jaw. That's when the chaos began. Bottles flew. Pepper spray burned. Someone screamed. Someone fell. Maya kept filming. Rico pulled two teenagers back as a smoke bomb rolled into their feet. Police stood between the groups. Then surged forward with batons. But they weren't swinging at the men in masks. They were swinging at the crowd. That was the moment Maya's lens turned. From the march, to the injustice. A viral video showed it all. A protester on the ground, blood from his ear. While a resist member stood over him, untouched. It spread in minutes. Millions of views. Outrage pouring across the country. And then came the pushback. The city couldn't stay neutral anymore. City council called an emergency hearing. The governor demanded answers. Civil rights attorneys filed injunctions. Survivors came forward with their own footage. The resist front wasn't anonymous anymore. The masks were torn away. Their employers were contacted. Their addresses exposed. Their funding traced. The courts moved. Slowly, but undeniably. Cole Maddox was arrested. Charged with conspiracy to incite violence. Transporting weapons across state lines. And coordinating with known domestic extremists. Rico visited the hospital twice in the weeks that followed. One for a broken rib. Once to sit beside a girl whose jaw had been shattered by a police baton. Maya's footage was submitted as evidence in federal court. Her documentary won 2 awards. But the scars stayed. And yet, they had won. Not by overpowering hate. But by enduring it. By refusing to surrender the soul of their city. Today, if you walk by Federal Plaza, you'll see a mural. A circle of faces. Maya, Rico. The elders. The children. The protesters. The protectors. In the middle, in bold red paint. They brought hate, but we brought us. They said it was a peaceful rally. But peace doesn't leave people bleeding. Peace doesn't shout racial slurs. Peace doesn't wear masks, swing fists, or come armed with smoke bombs and exit strategies. What happened that day wasn't protected speech. It was planned violence. And the country saw it. Not through filtered press releases. Not through PR statements or political spin. But through the raw, unflinching lens of Maya Jackson's camera. That footage changed everything. In the first 48 hours, the city was quiet. Shaken. Nursing its bruises and wondering, was it over? It wasn't. It had just begun. The first arrest came quietly. A resist front member identified as a retired police officer from Ohio. He had struck a protester in the head with a baton. It was caught in 4K. He turned himself in after his own son posted the video online and wrote, "This isn't patriotism, it's hate, and I won't stay silent." Within a week, there were 6 more arrests. Weapons charges. Assault. Unlawful possession of riot gear. Each name unmasked. Each history unearthed. And with every revelation, the resist front lost another layer of anonymity. They weren't soldiers. They were accountants. Truck drivers. School resource officers. Fathers. Husbands. Youth pastors. The lie had always been their invisibility. Now it was gone. Cole Maddox stayed silent at first. He refused to answer questions. Refused to disavow the violence. Refused to speak to the press. But his group was unraveling. Dozens of members began cooperating with investigators. Some out of fear. Some out of guilt. Some out of a desperate need to separate themselves from the blood. One of them, a 22-year-old former Marine, wrote a letter to the public. "I joined for brotherhood. I stayed because I was afraid to leave. What we did in New York. I'll carry that shame forever." The court proceedings moved fast, unusually fast. Because pressure was mounting. National civil rights groups demanded justice. Local organizers called for charges under federal hate crime statutes. City Council opened a formal inquiry into police conduct at the scene. They had to act. When the indictment came down, it was headline news. If you haven't liked this story or subscribed to this channel, please do so now. Cole Maddox charged with conspiracy to incite violence and organized hate crime. The Resist Front was officially classified as a domestic extremist group by the Department of Justice. Bank accounts frozen. Training camps raided. Allies in law enforcement exposed. And while the headlines focused on the toppling of this so-called movement, on the legal battles, the trials, the fall from grace, something even more powerful was happening at street level. The city began to heal. It started small. A community mural painted over the broken windows near Federal Plaza. A vigil held at night, candles lining the steps of the courthouse. Rico, still in a brace, reciting the names of the injured. And the names of those whose stories never made it to camera. Maya stood beside him, her press badge tucked into her jacket. Just a citizen again. A witness. Not reporting. Remembering. Then came the town halls. Packed rooms in every borough. Not yelling. Not arguing. But talking. Sharing. A Muslim teen named Layla spoke through tears. I was afraid to wear my hijab after that day. But when I did, a Jewish man on the subway gave me a thumbs up. That never happened before. We're seeing each other now. The Department of Education partnered with civil rights historians to launch a new curriculum. Resisting Hate in America. It became mandatory in all New York City high schools. Public safety policies were rewritten. Police officers who failed to intervene that day were disciplined. 2 were dismissed. The NYPD announced new bias training. Was it enough? No. But it was something. And in a system built to delay justice, something can feel like everything. Rico returned to organizing. Quieter now. More strategic. Less fire, more foundation. He co-founded the Freedom Line, a cross-borough network connecting artists, medics, lawyers, and activists. One of their first events. A unity walk retracing the protest route. This time in celebration, not fear. 15,000 people showed up. Maya turned her footage into a documentary. She called it The Price of Hate, What They Tried to Take From Us. It won awards. But she didn't care about that. What mattered most to her was a letter she received, handwritten, folded into an envelope with no return address. It read, My father was one of them. I saw your film. I don't know how to fix what he did. But I won't be him. Thank you. That's what truth does. It doesn't just inform. It transforms. Months passed. Seasons changed. The wounds scabbed. The city kept breathing. And one by one, the men who brought hate to New York City were sentenced. Some pleaded guilty. Some didn't. The trials were tense. Rico testified. So did Maya. So did survivors, doctors, journalists, and teenagers who never planned to be activists. In the end, the longest sentence was handed to Cole Maddox. 15 years. Federal prison. No parole. His statement. I didn't lose. The country did. He still didn't get it. He never would. But the city did. It had always gotten it. From Stonewall to Selma to Staten Island. From freedom riders to protest poets. From immigrants arriving with nothing. To kids growing up with everything but safety. New York has never flinched. Yes, it bleeds. Yes, it breaks. But it never, ever bows. The Resist Front came here to show their power. But in the end, they revealed their weakness. They wanted fear. They sparked fire. They wanted silence. They stirred a storm. They came to divide. But they reminded a city what unity really looks like. There's a park now, across from where it all happened. It's small. Unassuming. But every June, on the anniversary of the march, people gather. They sing. They speak. They remember. And near the benches is a plaque. It reads, To those who stood. To those who rose. To those who reminded the world. Hate may march. But love runs this city. They brought hate to New York City. And they paid the price. If you haven't liked this story or subscribed to this channel, please do so now. A big thanks for watching this story. Hope to see again.